Be the Talk, episode 229, featuring John Torrens. Welcome to Be the Talk. We go behind the talk 7 days a week for tips and techniques to help you change the world. I'm Nathan Eckel, and a talker myself. I'm interviewing others who change the world with their talk. You can too, even if you've never given a talk before. Let's get started with today's show. And we are live with John Torrens. John, are you ready to talk?
Yes, I am.
Professor John M. Torrens, PhD, is an entrepreneur, educator, and helps other people succeeding with raging ADHD. Your talk is called ADHD as an Entrepreneur's Superpower. John, welcome to the talk.
Thank you, Nathan. Great to be here.
Don't you love Talk Universe with a bio like that, so short, you know, it takes one to write one, and I can appreciate that because some of the bios I get are so long I have to trim them all down. I love in your talk, you talk about really your own growth journey. You talk about how the challenges of having ADHD can actually be flipped upside down, and they can actually be strengths in the proper context, John. So what are some of the context right off the bat? What are the contexts that you realize work for you and work for a whole lot of other people in the entrepreneur space, even not inside the entrepreneur space?
Yeah. So the main context we studied was in entrepreneurship. So the idea was that, we had a hunch, with me knowing different entrepreneurs and people who have started businesses, the people that I hung out with just seemed to be very distractible or very impulsive or kind of like me in that regard. So there was a hunch that, a lot of these people had ADHD. And so we decided to just take a look at it. And what we found was that, even though ADHD can be quite disabling for a lot of people in many contexts, in the context of entrepreneurship, it can be quite an advantage because of a variety of things that come along with ADHD.
Yeah. Well, and you go into detail about just not overthinking everything, being able to manage a whole lot of different things at one time, being able to delegate, all of these wonderful things. What am I leaving out, John?
Yeah, so there a couple of things that were really interesting is that we looked at serial entrepreneurship, and people with ADHD tend to just start more. Come of the study, we found that the people with ADHD were more likely to be in the process of starting a company at the time of the study, which was kind of interesting. The one of the other things was that their growth rates were much faster than those in the study without ADHD, which kind of makes sense because of that fast pace, that ants in your pants. They didn't tend to run the biggest companies of the sample we found, but they did tend to grow quite a bit faster.
Yeah. And the research that you do at, I believe it's University of Rochester, do you do actual research tracking this stuff? Was this based on, a bit of empirical data that you have, assembled perhaps, with your students or in your own pursuits?
Yeah, it's Syracuse University.
Syracuse, excuse me,
yeah.
down the state a little bit. Thanks for the correction.
Yeah. So my next door neighbor at the university, his name's Johan Wicklund, and he's a researcher in this area. And I just joined him for this one particular study. So we looked at people who were founders and CEOs of fast growing companies just to see how it worked out. We are going to start to branch out into looking at students and entrepreneurship programs and see if there's any correlation there, because my hunch is that students are drawn to entrepreneurship, possibly not necessarily because of the things I talked about in my talk, because of their impulsivity and things like that, but quite possibly because they just don't fit in a normal educational setting. So, for example, if you can't go get a job because of all the disabling characteristics of ADHD, you may just have to create your own job and become an entrepreneur. Likewise, a student who has ADHD and is having trouble functioning, they may just gravitate towards entrepreneurship. So we're going to take a look at that in the next year.
We were talking, or I was talking a little earlier today in other interviews. We talk about neurodiversity and all of this sort of thing. Is ADHD considered a part of neurodiversity, or is that not quite? I know it's not usually considered part of that, but the idea is working with strengths and in the right place, in the right setting. what could be a real liability for some people who are at the wrong place at the right time, or the wrong in the wrong time, can actually work out as a real strength in the right place at the right time.
No, yeah, it's certainly a type of neurodiversity for sure. So if you think about a normal educational setting, right, where, students are at their desks and they're doing their work, or they're reading silently, or they're doing worksheets, that may not be the way a person with ADHD learns, right? They may need to be up. They learn through motion and experience. So they don't fit in a lot of educational settings. So it is absolutely a diverse situation with somebody with ADHD.
Can you take us back to the light bulb moment for you, John? Because I know for a lot of us, and even personally, I think about some of the things that I do really well in my life, and then I think about some of the things that I don't do so well. And I don't ever want to shirk responsibility, but I do want to squarely face kind of my own wiring. Is there a light bulb moment for you in your life when you realized, hey, this is a strength, and I've got to try to mitigate some of these other effects, but I'm going to really deep dive this and use it as a real strength and a blessing, instead of treating it as something that I need to manage?
Yeah. So for most of my life, I kind of felt it was an advantage in a lot of ways. I just felt it enabled me to do things that maybe some of my peers just weren't able or willing to do. It's almost the reverse. There was a point, my company was fairly young, and I noticed that the people who were working with me were just having trouble managing me, or managing the relationship with me. So then I figured, okay, so maybe this is an advantage in a lot of ways, but I do have to take it seriously and approach it like a business owner or a founder, CEO, and try to work with my direct reports so they could manage it better.
Well, that's even more fascinating to me, because how easy would it be for someone who has very, very high creative drive, high energy, works faster, longer, earlier, later than everybody? I mean, all of the workplace success culture metrics that we have, especially in the United States, the hardest working, longest working country in the world, where we don't take our vacation days. I mean, for you to be willing to realize the impact that it can have in a not so good way on other people, and for you to take the personal growth steps to be able to connect with them, even though you're, the way that I'm framing it, at least, in a real position of strength. What caused you to choose to do that?
Right. I remember just being in a meeting with a few of my key people, and the company was still pretty small at the time. But I just remember looking at their faces. We were clearly heading in one direction, and then one day I said, "Hey, I think we're going to go do this." And I didn't really have a plan. I didn't have a lot of details. I was just going to go chase this other opportunity when everybody else had already been kind of going down another route, and it was just too fast. It was too random, or it seemed too random. And I thought, okay, I'm going to lose these people if I don't get my own act together, or at least somehow signal changes, or provide some data and rationale for why I need to do this, or why I want to do that. Maybe seek their input on it and have them, explain to me why we should slow down, or what are some of the details that I'm missing. So it was really just in an effort to keep people that I thought were really good.
Well, I love that realization, because no matter how bright, how fast, how quick, how hard work, I mean, we need a team, and leaders go from me to we. And leaders don't cross the finish line alone. And, perhaps for you, it sounds to me like there may have been a few early, smaller finish lines, and you came to the place where you realized, hey, it's almost not worth it if I'm the only one crossing another finish line by myself. I care about these people. I want to bring them up to the top of the mountain, be a Sherpa for them, so to speak. Can you relate to that, or do you have a different take on it?
Yeah, maybe a slightly different take, right?
Oh, I'd love to hear it.
My impulsivity, or my ability to not overthink things, right? Or lack of premeditation, you could call it, maybe not thinking things through, sometimes could end up being really advantageous, because I could take advantage of opportunities faster than other people. But it could also have some really detrimental side effects, right? If I don't think things all the way through, maybe I'm missing something that could be really bad. So just, I guess that acknowledgement, and the realization that my team could probably add quite a bit of value and help me prevent some of those things. It was one of the motivations.
So we've been enjoying this talk with John Torrens. His TEDx Syracuse University talk was called ADHD as a Entrepreneur's Superpower. And we're going to hear more about it in just a moment in the Blitz Round. People ask, how could I start a 7-day-a-week podcast? It's because of what I've learned from my mentors. Some of the best mentors in history aren't around anymore. They've left hours of one-on-one mentoring behind in their books. Each month at Classics on Tap, I record a new chapter from a classic business book to help you make a difference. Download your first chapter at classicsontap.com. And we're back. It's time for the Blitz Round with John Torrens. I'm about to ask John a series of either-or questions related to the preparation and performance of his recent TEDx Syracuse University talk. John, are you ready?
I am.
All right. Were you invited to speak or did you apply?
I applied.
All right. Were you in the zone or did you have nerves or neither or both?
I was in the zone.
How does that look when you're in the zone for you?
Yeah, just calm, confident. Yeah.
Are you a memorizer, an improviser, or a blender?
A blender.
How does that serve you? Can you describe how you blend the whole piece together?
Yeah, I knew the points I needed to hit, and every time I practiced it, I might have done it a slightly different way, but it just, it came off as more extraneous or extemporaneous rather. Yeah.
Okay, so a blend of both makes it more natural and real to the audience for sure. John, what's a tip, tool, or a technique that helped you?
Really just preparation and practice, right? So the crew that we did it with, TEDx Syracuse University, we had regular rehearsals and they had us submit drafts for milestones, and we did a lot of practicing. So by the time I got to the day of the talk, I wasn't really worried about what I was saying. I was able to enjoy the stage and the atmosphere and engage with the audience really well.
Yeah. Now, this is the cut for time question. What was the most painful part of your talk that you had to cut out?
The most painful part of I think there was a lot of data in the research that I just wanted to add in there, but it just became too much. So we decided to trim that down. Good
for you. Doesn't sound like that was too hard. If I'm talking to somebody that gave a talk on ADHD as a superpower, maybe it's not too difficult to let all the extra content go. Some of us, we want to hold on to that thing. It's like prying it from our cold dead hands. But Talk Universe, this is a good lesson to learn. Cut it down. If there's ever a doubt as to whether it's going to resonate with the audience, it's probably not going to resonate. So just cut it out, do everybody a favor, and do a shorter talk. John, last question for you. What's the most unexpected, strange, or just plain weird thing that happened during or right before your talk?
So the gentleman who was going right before me got about 3 or 4 minutes into his talk, and they realized that the recording equipment wasn't working. So the MC had to come out, stop the audience, restart the talk, and that was, it didn't really affect me that much. Only that was kind of bizarre. Yeah, I felt
that's not easy to do. Yeah. Incidentally, was the MC pretty smooth in doing that? That's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, they had several of them, and they kind of went back and forth, and they did a great job. Yeah.
Well, it's good to hear. We've been talking to Dr. John Torrens. His TEDx Syracuse University talk is called ADHD as the Entrepreneur's Superpower. And if you want to find out more about that, you can join us and go to our show notes page at BeTheTalk.com. We will have a clickable link where you can actually check that out and watch John's talk. As well as we'll have a second link for John's LinkedIn profile. You can connect with John, find out about this and other research. If you are an entrepreneur with ADHD and you want to find some of the goods as to some of the advantages, truly the superpower advantages statistically that John and his team have discovered, you're going to want to reach out to him on LinkedIn as well. And we'll be back with John Torrens for the final 10-second word of advice in just a moment. Everyone wants to change the world, but not everyone knows the first step. Before you can change the world with your talk, it has to be selected. So grab the templates, timelines, and tools that I use to get my talk selected at BeTheTalk.com. And we're back with John Torrens. It is time for the final word of advice for Talk Universe.
So for me, I would say, try to add a little bit of humor. I mean, I'm generally a pretty funny guy, and my own wife liked somebody else's talk better than mine because she thought it was a little more funny. And so if you have any kind of humor you can interject and get the audience laughing with you, I think that would be a great thing.
John Torrens, thanks so much for coming on the talk today and sharing your wisdom with Talk Universe.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Be the Talk. For tips and resources to help you change the world, go to BeTheTalk.com. See you tomorrow.